What if today's conversation inspires you in the design of your legacy? I'd like to welcome Aurora Winter to the Design Your Legacy podcast this lovely day. Welcome, Aurora.
Great to be on the show with you, Angelica. And I'm looking forward to inspiring people to create a meaningful legacy in multiple different ways that also will create multiple streams of income.
Wonderful. So, before we jump into the first question, would you share an icebreaker, whether it's personally or professionally, about yourself? Anything at all that could be fun or your choice?
Okay, fun little fact that I wasn't thinking we would get into on this legacy show is I actually write fantasy books, and we have little short fantasy videos on YouTube at Anna Zest series. And the fourth video went viral and has reached 250,000 people.
Oh, that is so
Fun
fun.
fact.
Yeah. Well,
Fun fact.
Well, before we jump into the first question, story is really powerful, particularly if you can draw out someone's imagination. So I've not
Yeah.
read that book, but I'd be curious to read that book because I think that whether somebody has opinions about Harry Potter or not, gosh, look at what it did globally in terms of children
Yeah.
and them thinking about what could be possible from our mundane lives.
Well, it's a trilogy. This is the first book, Magic,
Hmm.
Mystery, and the Multiverse. And there's two other books, and I'm writing more. But it also relates to legacy in this fun fact, surprising way. My son is a video game designer, so I write the scripts based upon just a little tidbit from the book, like not even a whole chapter, just part of a chapter. I write the scripts, and he creates the videos using all kinds of AI tools that he's very comfortable with because of his background as a video game designer. So when you create legacy pieces of IP, they can be books, they can be videos, they can be movies, they can be on YouTube, and who knows, you might get your whole family involved.
Yes. And I'm thinking, what if there's a future Netflix or streaming opportunity regarding that trilogy?
Exactly right. In
Oh, very
fact,
cool.
BBC expressed interest, but we haven't got a deal yet, so interest is not a green light, but could happen.
It's coming. It's coming. You moved from being a television executive, where success often means building someone else's platform, to founding Same Page Publishing, where authors own their intellectual property. So let's talk about, this whole book thing, because that's we chatted about that in the preamble. How did that shift change the way you think about legacy versus career success? And I think this is also such an important question because sometimes people think about their career, but we don't have the follow-up conversation regarding their legacy.
Yeah, and I would love people to leave this conversation today with a decision for one action that they're going to take that will build their legacy. This is going to be a fantastic conversation, but I hate for people to leave just being inspired. I'd love them to decide to take one piece of action. So I've always loved writing books since I was 9 years old. I started writing my first book and illustrated it. That was never published, but I've loved books for a long time. The problem with being in film and television is it takes millions of dollars to create a great movie. And by the time it's done, it may not be what you had written. You may be disappointed and whatever. What I love about books is that nowadays there's no gatekeeper required. So you can self-publish. It's now called indie publishing on Amazon. In fact, self-published books, independently published books, outsell the books published by the top five publishers. So indie publishing is no longer just a small little PS on the publishing scene. It's a mammoth thing. And there are many authors, best-selling authors, for example, in the fantasy space, who are doing very well. Thank you very much. And Brandon Sanderson is not the only one. So I'd love for people to know that you don't have to wait for permission from a gatekeeper, from an agent, from a publisher, from a movie studio to make something happen today. And, if you'd like, we can also lean into all the ways that the gatekeepers have been eliminated, empowering you to create your legacy, leave a bigger impact, but also create a platform, create multiple streams of income. So in brief, to answer your question, I loved being in film and television. There was, the whole Cannes Film Festival, and I got to go to the Oscars and wear all the fancy dancy gowns. But it was disempowering compared to being in publishing, where I can have control or I can help my clients have control and get their book or books done.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think a lot of times individuals don't realize that they can, this transitions to the next question, that they can maintain control. I think a lot of times people think that in order to get to where they want to go, they have to give their power away. that someone else out there has to have. I even think about someone like Taylor Swift who broke through and re-released
Exactly,
songs.
exactly.
And yet think about what she had to break through in terms of invisible, I don't want to say invisible ceilings, but really what she did for other artists out there because of this notion of I have to, in order to get to where I want to go, I have to, do things how they've always been done. Like I think there was a song by Bruce Hornsby about, this is just the way it is or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What if the opposite is true?
right?
What if, in order to create the legacy you desire, you do not have to go through any gatekeepers and you do not have to do things the way they've always been done? In fact, what if that is the fastest, cheapest, and most fun path to creating your legacy?
Yes. Okay, let's chat about the silent legacy of intellectual property. And it's also interesting regarding intellectual property because when somebody like Marilyn Monroe passes away, et cetera, or Tom Petty and on, there's like rights to intellectual property. But again, that this is an area that, particularly with individuals that are self-made, they don't necessarily think about because that's why we have to have this conversation today because we don't have this conversation at the local coffee shop. Okay,
Yeah.
so most people think legacy means either money or reputation, as well as just death and taxes, which I've heard about in the last 10, 11 years. Okay, yet intellectual property often outlives both. Why do you believe intellectual property or IP ownership is one of the most overlooked legacy assets, particularly for high achieving individuals?
I love this question. I think a book is like a seed, and it germinates when somebody opens the book and waters it with their attention. So a seed can actually, some kinds of seeds can last decades or even hundreds of years and germinate. Like my life has been impacted and touched by Rumi, you know, by Marcus Aurelius, by C.S. Lewis, by Agatha Christie. So many people who were already in the grave when I first read their books have deeply impacted me, both fiction and nonfiction. So if you have learned anything in this life, and I certainly hope if you are listening to the show, you're somebody who's a lifelong learner, wouldn't it be cool to give the gift to a version of you 15 years ago who needs the benefit of what you've learned? And a legacy can also be super impactful, even if it's only for a couple of years. But why not imagine that 100 years from now, your book, your message, your videos will make a difference?
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
it's really under imagined as part of legacy because I don't think people have fully leaned into the value of a brand. So I think like I'm writing a new book called Brand Strategy in the Age of AI. Catch the wave, own the future. And it's all really about now that we've got AI that can accelerate things, it can give us something very fast, very quick. What does this mean to personal branding? And what does it mean to legacy? What it really means is that average or generic content is going to become basically worthless.
Mhm.
But what will be more important than ever is your brand. And what is a brand? A brand is the stories that other people tell about you when you're not in the room.
Mhm.
How can you guide those stories? Well, write a story, write several stories. So your brand is going to be deeply unknown callers. Sorry about that.
No, no, keep going.
Your brand is your stories, your struggles, your hero's journey, the stories of your client that you've impacted, your story of launching your podcast and loving to lead this conversation about legacy. AI doesn't have that story. It's yours. So that part of building your brand is leaning into your stories, capturing your stories, writing down your stories. Once you share your story in any fixed form, whether it's audio, video, print, that is part of your copyright.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things in preparation for today's podcast I shared with you is that I always do the due diligence ahead of time. And I think there was the video on your homepage that spoke about that in today's economy, that what people want is transformation. So
Yeah.
you referred to our stories. Sometimes they can be called victory stories. In other words, how did you face that challenge or problem and how did you get through it? Because someone out there that you might think you have nothing in common with could look at your story or hear your story and say, well, wait a minute, I'm struggling with something and you made it through. And I
Yeah.
think that's where that personal development piece is like gold because AI is incredibly valuable, but AI can't tell a listener or a viewer how did you go from point A to point B in terms of matters of the heart.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as you mentioned, I have a background in film and television, so I've written about 30 screenplays and I've overseen 250 hours of television programming. So I know a lot of the classic stories, and a hero's journey is the most classic movie structure. It's Star Wars. It's almost every movie. And I
Top
think
Gun,
most people, pardon me?
Top Gun.
Top Gun, exactly. I think most people, when they're leaning into writing their first book, they want to airbrush out the struggle.
Mm,
But there is no hero without struggle.
that's the
I had a problem
vulnerability
and I
piece.
say that again.
That's the vulnerability piece.
That's the vulnerability piece, right? But if you just, I had a problem and I solved it. Okay, there's a knight on a horse, there's a dragon, and he slayed the dragon. That's not a
Hmm.
story.
Hmm.
There's a knight, he doesn't have a sword, he has to find one, he has to find a horse, he tries to find the dragon, he gets upset by all and derailed by all kinds of things. He finally confronts the dragon. The dragon almost kills him. He gets scorched with fire. He loses his sword and I don't know, he punches the dragon and the dragon leaves. That's a
And he
story.
faces self-doubt.
Yeah, and he faces self-doubt. So I invite everybody to collect these stories, including the struggle. A hero needs struggle. Otherwise, it's not a hero. And when you share your journey of transformation, overcoming your own version of a dragon, you're subtly inviting others to step into their own version of a hero. And so it's really very valuable. The other thing I want to share is 80% of people want to write books. Most first-time authors spend 3.5 years writing a book. I'm working with a client right now. He's was working on his book for a decade before working with me. It's hard to write a really great book by yourself. So why do it the hard way? And one of the things that I think keeps people stuck is they're trying to write one perfect book. But why
Mm.
think of it that way? Why not give yourself permission to write multiple books? A beautiful coffee table book and also an ebook that can be downloaded around the world quickly. Why not think of your life in various chapters and think of your books in various series? Like I've published 10 books, I've written more than that. So really don't try to put everything that you learned into one book. Instead, think of your ideal reader. What is the problem they're confronting today that you've already solved? And write a book about solving that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm just writing down a couple of notes as you speak. One of the things that I'm just going to draw a contrast for a moment, control versus convenience. So traditional publishing
Yeah.
offers validation as well as scale. They're the well-known heavy hitters in the marketplace we normally think about, but it comes often at the cost of control. So how can individual authors, self-made entrepreneurs, et cetera, think about the long-term trade-offs between convenience today with these traditional publishing houses and then continuity tomorrow?
Well, I'd love to use one of my favorite authors, Mel Robbins, as an example.
Oh, I love Mel
Um,
Robbins.
Yeah, she's fantastic, isn't she? Now, she has both done self-publishing and done traditional publishing. She's played both sides of the fence. And so I don't think you need to make an either or decision forever. Most people, I think, are best off self-publishing, as Mel Robbins initially did. As you probably know, she did a TED Talk. She almost didn't, she almost forgot to say the famous line about, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown that finally was her breakthrough for getting out of bed and stopping pressing snooze. She'd heard the NASA countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and she was in a very bad space, drinking too much, on the verge of bankruptcy, on the verge of divorce. Life sucked. But after watching the NASA takeoff 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the next morning, she's like, the alarm went off, and instead of pressing snooze multiple times, she did 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, got out of bed. And that she used that to interrupt everything that she was procrastinating about. And in her TED talk that was given in San Francisco, I believe, she almost forgot to give that little 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 story, but she remembered at the last minute. And that was the part of her talk that went viral. So she initially self-published the 5 second rule, I believe it was called, about just about that little moment and how you can pattern interrupt. Um, but she more recently published, I think it was December 2024, so about a year ago, The let them theory. That's got an interesting
Mhm.
story. In fact, I wrote and recorded a whole video about that on strategic basics, which was a very cool story because she's posting content all the time. She posted, I think, a like 45-second little tiny video about the let them theory, sharing a little thing that had happened, and she's just going to let go of it, just let them be them. She wasn't going to let it derate her. And that took off. That video took off. So she eventually decided, there's something here. I'll do a podcast. And then she did a book, The Let Them Theory. So that was published by, I think, Random House, one of the big five, and was a blockbuster New York Times bestseller immediately. I believe it sold in the order of 300,000 copies in the
Because so
first.
many people could relate to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt because there's like this cancel culture today. And in
Yeah.
that cancel culture, so many snap judgments are made of people, and it's not just swiping, it's those judgments, whether it's a quick judgment or a judgment over time, and somebody has to get to a place like she said, well, let them think what they want and still do
It's a
your
great
thing.
book. Yeah. And the other point about this book is it's not a new idea. The let them idea, the let them be them. Like it's in the Bible, it's in various philosophers. Marcus Aurelius wrote about it. It's not a new idea, but this is what I wanted to have people lean into. It's okay if you take an idea that you read somewhere else, but make it your own. Add your stories. Look at Mel Robbins. She's
Mhm.
really helped a lot of people. So don't immediately reject an idea because you heard it somewhere else before. Just add your stories and make it your own. Anyway, this is a long story. Bottom line is even though I think her book is still selling, I think it sold over 1 million copies this year, and the audiobook did amazing. But I think she would probably have made from selling the initial 300,000 books. If you're with a big publisher, you get maybe a 10% royalty. So maybe she made a $500,000. In contrast, Alex Hermosi self-published his third book, his third self-published book, which is called 100 Million Money Models. She published August 16th, 2025. I remember because August 17th is my birthday. And he promoted it on 2 YouTube live streams that had up to 100,000 people watching at once. And he won the Guinness Book of World Records for the most nonfiction books, sold in a short period of time, I think, for the weekend. And he made $100 million selling the books in the first week. But he had all kinds of back end money models. So let's contrast Mel Robbins. People bought her books from Amazon, from Barnes and Noble, from the little bookstore down this. Nope, she doesn't have access to that information. Alex Hormozy, she made maybe a $500,000 in the first week. He made $100 million, a lot more. But
Mhm.
the key difference is because he independently published, he was able to upsell, downsell, and cross sell those people. So he was able to offer them to go to his school. He was able to offer them to come to events with him in Las Vegas. So one of the things that many people don't think through is if you go with a big publisher, they will edit it how they like, but you will then have to work really hard to get those people to come to you, to your website, to your events, to your podcast. Whereas if you independently publish, you can have access to that client base and you can add more value to them and serve them, and you have a direct relationship. So that is a really big difference. And I imagine that Hermosi's 100 million that he made in the first week was just a drop in the bucket of the total value of that client base.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people either need to know someone like you or they need someone. And I don't know Alex's story regarding if he was mentored or if he just learned from other internet giants in the field to look at a battle plan, like commerce can be battle sometimes, and figure out, with all the arrows on the diagram of his business plan, business model, how can I make it work? But also, I think there's something about stepping into one's power to take it big, like go big or
Yeah.
go home. And also to be ready that when it goes big, where do you direct that energy? Do you direct them to your course or to your school or to,
Well, that's the benefit of working with a mentor like me before your book is published, because I help people come up with a strategic brand design so that the book is the appetizer. It's the gateway to a universe of connecting with whoever the author is. So most people press publish and then they think about marketing the book, or then they think about what else they can offer. If people work with us at Same Page Publishing, the first thing we do is create your business plan and your brand plan. And then we want your book to be as amazing as it can be, but just a little, I call it yeast. We add a little yeast throughout the book, and that changes everything. You can't really add yeast to bread after it's cooked. You'll have flat bread. But if you
Yeah,
just add a little bit of yeast, and what I mean by yeast is if it was your book, for example, oh, be sure to check out my Design Your Legacy podcast,
be sure to
or
book a session.
book a session, or I host events, or stories of people whose legacy you've deeply impacted. So you just have a little yeast in the book, and people will go, oh, well, I should book a session with Angela.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that point is something that gets overstepped, and people don't realize at the end of every chapter there could be an invitation to do the next step, whether that is, buy the next thing or book a session or invest or just get an introductory meeting or go to a retreat.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
Or download a free PDF that
correct.
adds more, like people can get this book, Turn Words into Wealth, for free. And it comes with 5 videos that teach you how to attract capital clients and media coverage, adding more value. I can't obviously put a video in a book, so I'm not withholding anything.
But you can put a
And
link to a
you
YouTube
can put a
video.
link,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But then they're starting to come to your community.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I learned this the hard way. The first book I published, I didn't do any of these things. And then I'm like, oh, I see. I should have put those things in. And then, you fix it and you learn. Because I've been in the publishing industry, since 2005 was my first published book, which was endorsed by Dr. Wayne Dyer, my hero.
Oh, that's wonderful. My mother loves him. I think a part of the what you're also directing listeners and viewers to is it's the question of where am I taking my client or customer? Like,
I
where are we
really,
going? And so
yeah,
so if you know how to take them from A to Z, and Z is an opportunity to work with you regarding, I think you had said a strategic brand design, then that
yeah,
ultimately, because if somebody is really ready and they're a red apple out there, it's like, okay, well, how far can you take me regarding your knowledge? And your answer is, well, I can take you to the finished strategic brand design plan. And then it's great.
exactly right. If people
Yeah.
want a strategic brand design, they can book a call with me at bookcall.biz.
Yeah.
We start with the strategic brand design, and Same Page Publishing really focuses on launching thought leaders. So the difference between just getting a publishing deal with a publisher or an agent or working with a ghostwriter is they will help you with your book. And if you're working with a publisher, they'll even publish your book. But we launch thought leaders. So I realized that there's so many different moving pieces to launching a thought leader. And I'm like, certain people will just want it all baked in together. So we start with the strategic brand design. What is the return on investment or the ROI for your book? Then I interview people and we turn that into a book. But then before the book is published, we book them on podcasts. We do media training. We apply for book awards. We set up the whole book launch advertising. We get the book reviews. In fact, one of my clients, Michael Stockham, his book was just honored with a Book of the Year award. So he's thrilled. It also won the American Fiction Award. These are things that really should be done before the book is published, but time and time again, I've seen people with great hearts and great businesses and even a decent book who miss their opportunity by just not having the business and brand design thought through and not doing the marketing, not having media training, not getting on podcasts before the book comes out. I mean, one of the reasons that Atomic Habits by James Clear was on the New York Times bestseller list for 5 years is because he went on podcasts for a year before
Hmm.
the book was published. And he sent the book out to influencers to read before the book was published. So this is the difference between being an amateur and knowing what you're doing and thinking through the whole plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Books as a legacy structure. Let's bring this up right now because I'm going to say again, people think of legacy as death and taxes, and it's so much more if we can have the conversations now, if we can structure out the plan now. And a lot of times people don't think about a legacy plan. You could say to someone, do you have a retirement plan, and make them very uncomfortable if they don't have a retirement plan. And then you could say, do you have a legacy plan? But even that is such a new thing, particularly since two-thirds of the days affluent are self-made. So they weren't having these conversations at the breakfast table or the dining room table or the holiday meals. It's like a
Yeah.
very, yeah, brand new thing, unless again, you know someone or you tune into a podcast. So, okay, you want to just describe books.
Well, I want to give a couple of different examples on this. I thought this was such a great question, and it's not one that I'm usually asked. So, for example, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, that actually launched a whole empire. and he's passed
Mm.
on now, but his son is running it, and his son actually has written some other books. I think the Eighth Habit to do with trust, I believe. Anyway, so if you have a really good book like The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, you actually have much more than a book because corporations bought that book by the case, by the hundreds, by the thousands to hand out to employees, and then they had lectures and workshops, which were led by the Stephen Covey's team, and now his son's team. So that's one way to think about it. The Wealthy Barber is a best-selling Canadian book about wealth that is told through this hypothetical story about a wealthy barber. But there's a really interesting story about that book, which it was available in print and ebook. The son, and again, it's a legacy story because the son got involved, and the son came home or came to the office and told his father, "Okay, I've got the TD Canada Trust. I believe it was the TD Canada Trust. I might have the bank wrong. Would like to license and distribute the ebook for free to their clients for a year." The father said, Stephen Covey, or what? Sorry, basing on his name. He's like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. That's going to cannibalize sales. But then the son said, well, they're offering $400,000 for the license just exclusively to give their clients the ebook just for 1 year. And he's like, okay, for 400,000, I'll do it. And that what they noticed was that print sales increased. This is the really cool thing. Like it snowballs. So part of a legacy is if you can get things snowballing, if you can reach the tipping point, it can affect generations for years to come if you put that effort into it. And then just one other little tiny story. I wanted to quote, I think, a couple of passages from A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis, which was later made into the movie Shadowlands with Deborah Winger and Anthony Hopkins. Great movie. So I had to reach out to his estate to get permission because they've got an estate that's controlling all the C.S. Lewis books. And in fact, when I was in film and television, we optioned the screw tape letters by C.S. Lewis to make into a film. So there's a lot of value in the intellectual property. You just want to make sure that you've set it up right, that you've got the copyright, that you've got the chain of ownership clear, and that the most important thing is think of it as an asset. Think of it as a valuable asset. So you need to capture that asset in fixed form, such as a book that's got copyright to have a long value.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'm laughing over here because I think also it is a door opener. And I think about Brene Brown. She did that TEDx talk, and then she had that lunch with her college girlfriend afterwards, and they were just joking over the lunch. And she remembered she said something along the lines of, if you did some in college and then you want to take it back, and she couldn't take her TEDx talk back because it went like viral, and I think it like made the top 10 list. And then
Yeah.
everyone saw it, and she was wearing that brown shirt. And even though people were critical because she looked like a quote professor, but it went viral because people could relate to it. But once the cat's out of the bag, like you had said, it could compound influence over time. Like, yeah, obviously it opened up doors with like the Oprah show and other books and her public speaking circuit tour and all of that.
The Netflix special.
All
Whoever
of it. Yeah.
also the Netflix special.
But it also is very interesting. So the question was about, transferring wisdom. And here she was as a professor in some town in Texas. It wasn't Harvard, it wasn't Yale
Mhm.
or Princeton or Stanford. It was some university in Texas. And yet she was like this unknown professor that just kept doing her research.
Yeah.
And then it went global because that's what the internet can do these days.
Scientist storyteller. Yeah.
Sure, sure.
So one of the things that is very important with legacy is you need to have a brand. You can't just be one of 100 similar experts. You don't want to be like the difference between a commodity. A commodity is like steel or like milk. So, for example, when California did the Got Milk campaign, that actually boosted sales of milk by 7%. So that was effective, but it boosted all milk sales. That's the definition of a commodity. If you advertise steel, it'll boost all steel, not just one company. Whereas a brand would be something like Ferrari or
Mm,
Tesla or
hmm
VW or Chanel
hmm
or Gucci. So a legacy has to have a brand. In order to have a powerful legacy, you have to have a brand. And in my belief, one of the easiest and most powerful ways to capture that brand is a book.
Yeah,
Because here's the difference. I think the other thing I really am excited about and want people to consider is that it's Amazon is the number three search engine. So if you have any kind of expertise, you want to have a book on Amazon with a clear title and subtitle. You're laughing. I want to hear what you have to say. But let me just finish this thought. And YouTube is the number two search engine. So, and now things are shifting from search engine optimization, SEO, to AEO or GEO or whatever we're going to call it, basically the LLMs or the large language models finding us. So, my strategy that I'm doing, which obviously I wouldn't do if I didn't believe in it, is be all over Amazon. I've got 10 published books and then have several YouTube channels. I've got Strategic Basics, which is the nonfiction. I've got Anna's S series, which is the fiction. And then I do YouTube channels for clients whose books we've created. So I invite people to just consider since October 2025, we can create videos at a cost that is breathtakingly low. The whole playing field changed. And what I would give the clear metaphor, it's like back in the day when we just had newspapers before radio and television, everybody read the newspaper. And then we had radio, and it's like, yay, radio! This is so exciting. And let fewer people read newspapers. They didn't completely die. In October 2025, we now suddenly have TV. TV quality or feature film quality is basically available at a successful small business price point, which never happened before. So audio, which is like most podcasts are audio, they're going to be replaced by this new video format, which you can see on my YouTube channels, Anna's S series or Strategic Basics are a couple of examples. So I think 2026 is a pivotal year for brand building because you can take advantage of video. A video on YouTube is like a magazine. People are probably not going to watch it a year from now. But if you've also got a book, which people might read a decade from now, then you've got both top of mind awareness and long-term legacy. Okay, I wanted to hear what you were laughing about.
oh, well, because I saw that on your one of the videos on your YouTube channel, and I thought, well, I do have my podcast on YouTube, and you're absolutely right. People do want to see the video because they want to see the person's face and read their body language. In other
Yeah.
words, is this person legitimate? Are they the real deal? Can I trust them? Because
Yeah.
as much as people enjoy the convenience of AI, we still want the real thing when it comes to like photographs and real conversations, which is why podcasting still, outdoes like streaming on Netflix, etc. But I laugh because I don't have any books yet up on Amazon. But a part of that is because I've read some other legacy books and I think, okay, well, this is good, but it's not great. And I want something that's like timeless. That's why I laugh because I'm like, well, I don't have anything on Amazon.com yet.
Oh, we got to fix that for you.
But I also smiled because one of the things I chatted with you in the preamble is about the feminization of wealth. And so I think it's really interesting that as a trailblazer, I always talk about like the Boy Scout or the Girl Scout leader that blazes a trail through the forest to get to the canoe by the lake and can tell someone else to watch out for that poison ivy or we're going to pass that beautiful waterfall. It's like you could say to other women that are thinking about designing a legacy that, which leads into the next question regarding media literacy, like don't be scared because I think I've read articles and I don't know how profitable or successful it's been, but there's an organization called the CAA, the Creative Artists Agency, that's now tapping into family offices and affluent individuals. And so if 50% of the wealth is going to go to women in the next 10 to 20 years, then some of those women might say, yes, I'd like to publish a book, but I also need what you called it, a strategic brand design. And,
Yes, we
and,
need a strategic brand design.
yeah, absolutely. And so then there's this thought of, well, what if she's no longer demure, supportive, and helpful?
Well, then she's my kind of person.
Right? Right? And I think about even someone like J.K. Rowling, when she first started, people said, oh, well, a woman can't succeed with children's stories or this or that. And then look at today, it's, they've got amusement parks with Harry Potter themes. And yet,
It's very clever. She kept the digital rights to Harry Potter. So the ebook and the audiobook rights she kept. And
and these
that
are those nuances and the distinctions that a lot of times, I think about women and if they've, and this is always my metaphor, if they've never been out sailing on a yacht. I mean, because I had sailing lessons growing up off the coast of Virginia, courtesy of my dad. Thank you, Dad. Okay. But if someone does, like if a woman doesn't even know the word starboard and you put her out onto a yacht race, and that's what it's like to inherit wealth or to receive a position regarding succession, etc., she doesn't have the training. And so,
This is why you need a strategic brand design and somebody in your corner, because if you only deal with one piece of it, everybody is going to just give you that one piece. But what is
mhm,
really great about having a coach or a strategic brand design is like, what's the big picture? Let's pull back to the 50,000 foot view and look
mhm,
what's best for you and your family overall, right? And like so many females, I guess it applies to men too. It's not by following what's always been done that you make a lot of money or you make a big difference. J.K. Rowling, if she had done it the good girl way, she would have given up all of her rights.
mhm,
Mel Robbins, she had a TV series, kind of an Ellen sort of a thing, and they canceled her. So she's like, well, forget it. I'll just do basically the same thing on my own podcast. And look how that's going brilliantly for her. So I would love us to break this idea that as good girls or that it's right to follow what's always been done. I never do that. I always go, what is everybody else doing? Let me go the other
yeah,
way.
yeah. Oh, that takes
So for
boldness.
example, like with your book, so many people don't write it because they're thinking, oh, it's not good enough. But that's when we have the spotlight on ourselves. Take the
Mhm,
spotlight off yourself and decide who your ideal reader is and what is the biggest problem that they're having right now. And if you can solve that problem or take it, lessen it, or help them have a breakthrough, then that book is going to be useful. Instead of thinking like you're taking your PhD and it's got to please the powers that be who will give you a pat on the head, think about when did you get lost in your own life, or what do you know that others don't know? Like I put 20 years of my experience into Turn Words into Wealth. Honestly, if I talked people through this book and gave them one-on-one coaching, it would be $1 million because it's that much time that I've invested into it. Now, why do I do that? Two reasons. I want to help people. It's part of my legacy, but also oftentimes people read my book or they hear me on a podcast and then they book a business breakthrough call at bookcall.biz. Next thing we know, I'm doing their strategy session. Next thing I know, I'm helping them write their book. So it's got that little bit of yeast in it that certain people will want more. And I want to say one more thing and then really have to let you talk is you don't have to worry about giving away the secrets. You don't have to withhold anything in your book because a small percentage of people will always want more. They will want to work with you one-on-one. They'll want your coaching. They'll want your mentoring. They'll want to hire you as a speaker. They'll want to come to your workshop. They will want you to do it with you or they want you to do it for them. And so you can give as much as you can in your book and still your business can thrive because a certain percentage will want more.
yeah. It reminds me, before I go into the next question, of a young, and I say young, I think she might be 29 years old right now. It was a interior designer out of Orange County, California, and the last name is McGee, Studio McGee. I can't think of her first name. It's like Sid and Shay McGee. I can't place it 100%. Anyways, she left to somewhere in Utah, Salt Lake City or somewhere, opened up this interior design firm. She now has got two shows, I think, on Netflix. But what she had said is in the world of interior design, the designers typically hoard their secrets. They hoard who their suppliers are.
Mm.
And her husband said, give it all away. So she did it, and then it blew up. And she's got like 4 million followers on her YouTube channel. And she's done now houses regarding interior design in like Mexico and globally. And yeah,
Yeah,
but that's what her husband said. He said, give it all away.
yeah.
Don't hold back. And I thought, wow, well, good for that advice from the husband.
Good for that advice. And also, one of the four human superpowers. In fact, I just released a Strategic Basics episode about the four human superpowers that are more valuable in the age of AI. It came out today,
Mhm.
um, middle of December, because I don't know when this is going to be released, when your episode
Next
is going to be
Friday.
released. Oh, okay, pretty soon. One of your superpowers is your taste, your style. So I think, well, you don't need to know that I think it. If you just look around, information has very little value now because ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity or whatever can give you a data-based answer quickly. Unfortunately, it's super confident even when it's wrong.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
beware. But you are the only person with your taste, with your aesthetic. So there's a lot of value in refining that and declaring that and codifying that so that, like Annie Warhol or like the designer that you just mentioned, there's something going on there that's unique. And I think that's one of the four human superpowers that will become even more valuable in the age of AI. And then you can use AI, or I can help people use AI to scale that. But we want the human being leading with their stories, their creativity, and the other human superpowers.
Yes. So let's chat about media literacy for a moment as a wealth skill. And I realize I've got a window of time with you today. So, having operated inside Hollywood, what do affluent individuals and entrepreneurs and their families not understand about media messaging and the narrative tool? And how does that ignorance quietly erode legacy?
I hate the quietly erode. Um, there's so much that people don't understand, but here are a few tips that I can give that will make sense. So it's in the media quite a bit that people have the attention span of a goldfish, and that, human beings only have an 8-second attention span. I want to correct that and refine that because that's a little bit wrong. So that there's two parts to communicating effectively. Well, there's more than two. There's all kinds of blueprints for effective communication. And when you know the blueprints, you can build communication that always stands. But the goldfish point is people have gotten faster at deciding if your content is worth their time. In
Mm.
fact, on social media, they're spending about 1.7 seconds to decide if they're going to watch a little bit longer. So people's filtering has gotten better. It's not necessarily that their attention span is shorter. That is misrepresented what's happening there. So in order to grab people's attention very quickly, what I am calling that is the movie trailer mindset. So you need a movie trailer mindset in order to grab attention really quickly. What's at stake? Who's the hero? What are the problems that they're facing? So even when you're introducing yourself at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, don't say my name is blah 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 and I work for blah 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 because you've already blown your 8 seconds. Instead, talk about the problems that you solve. But then what I want to draw everybody's attention to is people will binge content for hours. So Joe Rogan has talks to guests for 3 hours, or people will hop on and just watch video after video after video. So once you have gotten permission, once you've gotten past that initial filter, and we can go into the neuroscience of it if you'd like, people will watch for a long time. So I call that the showrunner mindset. So the Netflix showrunner mindset. So what we help people with is creating content that both does the book trailer mindset, grabs attention quickly, and then also gives them a reason to come back, gives them story arcs or campaigns or things that continue over time. So, for example, we have like a series of 4 videos going out right now, and they go together. So, at the end of the video that I talked about the 4 human superpowers, I'm like, but AI is not your enemy. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about how you can use AI to amplify your message, right? So there's a continuity that people go, oh, I need to come back next week. So um, that's one of the things I wanted to say about that. And we could talk about neuroscience if you want.
I think that's great. And absolutely, I've read the statistics that males tend to listen to longer podcasts. Like they'll stick with it for 60, 120 minutes, et cetera. And I'm like, wow, regarding the long form. And I don't know if it's because they're on buses, trains, automobiles, bicycles, they're jogging. I don't know the backstory. But ironically, 80% of the listeners of this podcast are male. But that means that they still have got mothers and sisters and wives and daughters, et cetera, friends, et cetera. Okay. All right. Let me
Well, we
bring.
love men. But here's the other thing that's really cool about video. According to meta research, video is statistically significantly memorable at under 1 second. So I love the 1-2 punch of books and video.
Interesting. I wonder if that's because people are still visual and they want to
Yeah,
see
people are very
the
visual.
the face and look into the eyes of whoever's on the screen. Like,
Yeah,
is there a human in there?
yeah.
Yeah.
And, at some point, people will be licensing I think they already are if you're a famous actor, licensing their face, licensing their voice.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Well, I don't have anything after this, so we can keep going, but you let me know.
Okay.
Okay. Let me bring up the founder's voice. Many successful leaders delay writing their books because they're, quote, too busy, and I understand this, or unsure what to say. In your experience, what is the real reason people hesitate to capture their book, their story, etc., and what does that cost them long term?
I think whatever your gross revenue is per year, it probably costs you 10 times that.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
huge. It's
Okay.
huge. There's such a long, there's such a, it's like you're a quantum leap forward if you have your book published, not just any book, but like a well-respected, well-received book. Um, it's like having a degree. I mean, yes, you can get by in life without a degree, but if you have an MBA or if you have a PhD or you've got a master's degree, it opens doors that you didn't even know were shut to you before. And this is what it's like with a book. So most people probably make sense to them. Maybe you don't know, but most people will probably think, if you think it through, you need to have a book to speak. You need to have a book to get on podcasts. You need to have a book to get on any stages of any decent size. Speaking is the highest paid profession. So even relatively unknown speakers who are making 25,000 to 35,000 a pop if they've got something going on or they got a TED Talk or they have some kind of momentum. But these are not names that you would know, but names that you would know, like a James Clear or a Ryan Holiday or Tim Ferriss. And they're probably bringing in a solid six figures per 90-minute talk. And then even more famous people may be making a half a million or even $1 million per talk, like Oprah. Or right now, the Guinness Book of World Records for the highest paid speech goes to yours truly, Donald Trump, for a speech he gave in 2017. So that's not even that reason recent. He's paid $1.5 million for a talk. But here's the thing. The six or seven figures you're getting paid to speak is only the beginning of how important it is to be at that level because the people in the audience are the movers and shakers. They're going to invite you to speak. They're going to invite you to consult. They're going to invite you to be on their board. They're going to want to acquire your company or have you, do business with them. So you just enter this rarefied field that you may not even realize you're a little bit shut out of now because you don't have that credibility. You don't have that power. You don't have that star power. But just real quick, even a little bit of star power can make a huge difference. So one of my clients, Michael Stockham, he's a litigation attorney, and I'm helping him write a series of legal thrillers. He's the one that his book won Book of the Year and American Fiction Award. We're working on his third book now. So his books have got over 3 million pages read, over 3,000 reviews, and a bunch of awards, but he's not making a ton of money from his books yet. You need to have, if you're going to be fiction, you need to have at least a trilogy. And he doesn't have a trilogy yet. But here's the surprising thing. He works for a large law firm, and when big clients come to hire a litigation attorney and they're choosing between maybe a dozen people who are qualified, there's like all 11 boring men, white men in gray suits with that look identical, and then there's my client, Michael Stockham, and he's equally qualified, but he's got a little something, something going on because he's a best-selling award-winning author. He's been on TV, radio, and podcasts. And they're like, well, if all of these people could do the job, why not hire the interesting one? So he's brought his firm over seven figures of new business just because he's got a little bit of local star power. So not having your book is costing you a lot more than you think. As I said, a rule of thumb, obviously, it's just a rule of thumb, but 10 times whatever your current gross revenue is probably what it's costing you.
Interesting, interesting. I always think it's like a book is like an icebreaker in a sense, just like listening to someone on a podcast, because then listeners out there or viewers feel like maybe they know you a little bit, even though they've
Yeah,
never met you.
that's
And then they'll
right.
approach you over email. And
Exactly right.
yeah.
And I help people write books the easy way. Like basically, once we've done the strategic brand strategy and decide who the book is for and what problems it solves, then maybe we'll have 10 chapters. And then I just interview the person. Like a podcast interview, they will know what the questions are more or less in advance. They can prepare if they'd like to. I interview them. Then we go on to the next chapter, and that becomes the first draft of the book. We polish it up, go back and forth, and it becomes a thoughtful book, but in their voice, with their stories, and a very human voice, as opposed to spitting something out that AI generates that could be just anybody could have generated it.
Yeah. I think AI is great in the sense as a reference point, but it needs like it could be the framework to get us started. But then like you're right, people forget that they've got to put their input in. it's not just like you push the buttons on the Garmin navigation device or whatever, and then you sit back because even Garmin can be incorrect. They might not know certain mountain streets and so forth. But okay, let me bring up personas for a moment if I can. And I realize that not everyone's going to become a Katy Perry. I think Katy Perry, who's an American singer for any of the international listeners out there, she had a breakdown where she's like, they only love me, but they don't know they love my persona, but they don't know me. Okay, well, some people aren't going to get there, but let me bring up the identity behind the spotlight. So you've seen how visibility can sometimes distort identity. How can entrepreneurs, leaders within family businesses, et cetera, build public authority without becoming trapped by personas that don't reflect who they truly are or who they want to be remembered as?
Well, I think there's this whole authenticity trap. I think a better way to think about it is how Beyonce thought about it. So she gave herself a stage name, and
Is that
later that
Sasha
was
Fierce?
exactly Sasha Fierce. Exactly right. And Adele actually did the same thing and had Sasha something else, Carter, I think it was. So I would, instead of saying, well, how can people know the real you? I would just invite you to choose your persona when you're performing, when you're speaking, and have that be aligned with your vision and your mission. People don't need to know your dirty laundry or, that you're PMSing or whatever. They don't need to know that. In fact, I would suggest that you want to show up as your most heroic self so that you can be the most helpful while also being humble that, well, my way of thinking about it is that we're only channels for creativity flowing through us and that we're only here for a short time. I mean, my husband died when he was 33 years old. We don't have forever. So think about, what legacy do you want to leave? How do you want to impact people? And who do you want to be remembered as? And be that person. And at first you might think, yeah, well, I'm not really that great. Well, choosing to be that person, at least when you're in public, will start you on the path of becoming the person that you want to be. So, um, my rule of thumb is, uh, 'cause I love to share self-deprecating stories about myself if it will be helpful to the other person and if I'm all the way through it. So I don't think it's helpful or kind to be bleeding all over the page or the video if you're not all the way through it. But if you've gone through something difficult, like I'm totally recovered from my husband's death, so I could talk about that in a way that would be helpful to other people. Um, anyway, that's my kind of rule of thumb. So
Yeah,
if
I think
that's
that's great. Yeah. Well, if I go back to where are you taking the reader or the viewer or the client, if you've already processed it, then you can take them to that finish line. If you haven't processed them, you're kind of like leaving them in the middle of the storm, like the
If you
life of
haven't
Pi.
processed it, then that would be the opportunity for you to seek a mentor who can help you process it. So
Yeah.
sometimes in life we're the leader, and we're the leader when we've processed it and we've come out the other side. And sometimes in life we're the follower when we're still processing it. So that is a part of you that you could seek a mentor to help you out.
Yes. Okay, so let's bring up publishing as governance. So, in the world of legacy planning, we always talk about family constitutions and values charters. Some individuals who are listening may not know about these documents. It's okay, it's just like the legal financial side. Okay, but how can books serve a similar role regarding codifying philosophy, decision-making frameworks, values for teams, families, or future generations?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. And I do have a good answer. But I did want to circle back just for a second to talk about AI, because you had said that it would be maybe good to use AI to create the framework for a book, and I completely disagree with that.
I,
I
I
think
think about it as a starting point is all. Like, okay, well, if I'm stuck like in a creative sense, then at least it'll get me out of the box.
I don't use it as a starting point. I
Okay,
use it as a more of a go research this for me or
okay,
check my spelling or is there anything missing?
okay.
Because if you use it as a starting point, you probably won't like where you get because you want to, do the brand strategy and make sure that it's your vision and your story. So I think it's important to not rush into using AI. First, think about your ideal client or your ideal reader and what problems are they having and how do they feel, and that is your starting point, the problem you want to solve for them. But and then just one more other thing about AI. I think AI is a wonderful tool, But like any tool, it is only as valuable as the person wielding it. So, for example, Michael Jordan and a basketball is a tool. Give him a basketball, it's worth $1 billion. Give me a basketball, it's worth a sprained ankle. So, if you really want your book to be excellent, work with somebody who's published 10 books and has 10,000 hours in publishing, and if it's not that important to you, then don't.
Mhm.
So, whatever's important to you, like if you're building a house, you wouldn't just start building. You would have a blueprint first before, I mean, do the, yeah. Otherwise, you might end up with the roof on the ground. We don't want that. Okay, so back to what your question was. This may be useful. So I launched a company called the Grief Coach Academy because I've launched multiple different companies and sold several of them. And the Grief Coach Academy was my way to give back to other grieving people. I really wanted to help people recover from grief, but I also wanted to change how people thought about grief. So at the time that I launched the Grief Coach Academy, people thought that if you were grieving, you needed to see a therapist. And I disagreed with that. I thought grief is normal and natural. If you don't grieve after somebody you love dies, then you need a therapist. And I also disagreed with the way that grief support groups were typically run. I attended a number after my husband died, and I thought they're aptly named. They support grief, not recovery. So grief support groups
Mm.
in churches often I felt supported people marinating in the energy of grief. So at first, when I did the Grief Coach Academy, which I only started because I was coaching people one-on-one at that time through grief because they found me through my book. Even though my book didn't tell them anything, because I was on radio, so people were like, "Oh, I Google her and find her," and reached out to me. So two of my clients who were young widows in the same week said almost the same thing to me. They said, "You helped me more than my therapist has helped me. In one case, in 6 months, and the other case, in 2 years. And I love my therapist, but you helped me more in that one session than they've helped me for a long time. Would you teach me how to coach other people the way you are coaching me?" Like, okay, catch the message. Anyway, so I started the Grief Coach Academy, and initially I did everything. But then over time, I created a 9-step process for coaching people through grief. There's a book, there's a workbook, there were videos, there were PDFs, there were certification exams, there were like process, standard operating procedures for everything. So the legacy piece of that is because I created the systems for the training, etc. I was able to license that property to somebody else who's now running the Grief Coach Academy. I was able to pass the torch. So when you codify what you care about, you create more value. And in many cases, that value can be sold or licensed or possibly even franchised, to multiple people. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but that's what I thought would be useful.
Yeah, it does because someone later on, let's say, I don't know if you have children or not, but whether you have children or you don't have children, someone somewhere is going to come across that challenge or problem, like we've chatted
Yeah.
about before within this hour, and they're going to need to know how to solve it. Because a part of
Yep.
legacy, as well as like what comes with wealth, are all of these blind spots of things that are going to get swung at you, and you're like, oh my goodness, what do I do? And also in today's day and age, people not only are things faster right now, and people expect an answer like yesterday, but also it's like you might not know how to deal with it. And then it's like, do you just stay frozen in that grief? And I think that's what you spoke about a moment ago, is because you did the personal development work, maybe beyond licensed therapists out there, you found the remedy. I go back to the idea of like the path through the forest to get to the canoe by the lake. You're like, I know
Yeah.
how to get there. Here's a shortcut. You don't have to stay wandering in the forest on a loop for three
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. Exactly right.
And the
So,
difficult, I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, you go ahead.
Well, I think one of the difficulties, and I've even like I was having a conversation with a family office professional, and they had said, "Oh, well, the problem with therapists is they just want that weekly or monthly check," and that could be true, but it depends. Do they get you to where you want to go? If they can get you there, then pay them because it's valuable. But if they're just sucking off that weekly paycheck, then obviously you have to see the nuances of how much personal development work did that individual do? Because if they've done it, then they get you to the next step. Like I heard someone say the other day, well, if you come into a large amount of money as an inheritance, they said the first rule is trust no one. I think that's BS. You've got to trust someone somewhere because you got to start making those baby steps to go from point A to point Z. And each individual, if they have truly done the inner work, can get you to point Z. And that's like
Yeah.
everyone has a first day, and you got to start somewhere. You can't just write everyone off, including the advisors. Okay, please say what you're going to say.
It sounds like post-traumatic stress if they're going to write everybody off. Yeah. And I had post-traumatic stress. My husband died in front of me, so it can throw you into a hyper-vigilant state. What I love about coaching, which is distinct from therapy, and all generalizations are false. Some coaches are good, some therapists are good. A lot of coaches are good, and a lot of therapists are good. But what I really love about coaching is it's very forward focused. So, yes, it is good to a point to look at what has happened in the past, but oftentimes that only digs you a deeper hole. We're going to China here. Whereas what I love about coaching, it's all about questions like the questions you're asking me. It's forward momentum. What do you want to stand for? How do you want to design your ideal life? How much money do you want to make? How much impact would you like to make? How would you like your company to be set up? Would you like, your children to be active and part of running it? Like, if you had a realistic magic wand, what kind of impact would you make in 10 years? Like,
Hmm.
think big. It's so easy to get just in the comfort zone. But I think Tan Sullivan published a book called 10X is easier than 2X. And I think there's a lot to that. I think when we just try to 2x whatever we're doing, we usually end up with 20% more. But if we challenge ourselves, and a coach can really help you with this, to think, well, what if I could 10x? What if I could 100x? What would that look like? And that's where I'm excited about AI because it can help us do some things that are routine much faster.
Yes.
Like every time I have a book, we have to proof it so many friggin' times, and there's still typos are like cockroaches. They seem to survive. So we do 2 rounds of human editing, but now we've also added multiple rounds of AI check. And it still will miss things that the human being will catch, but now the human being hopefully gets a pretty clean manuscript. So that's one thing AI is very quick at. Why not add more quality quickly?
Yes. Okay, let me bring up women again, because in the next 10 to 20 years, about 50% of the wealth transfer is going to be going to women. So,
Yay!
yes, as a female who has rose through media and then built her own publishing empire, what patterns do you see among women who claim their voice versus those who outsource or diminish it? And how does that impact their legacy?
Wow, that is a really big question. I think it's everything. You know, I'll tell a little story of myself because I'm through it. I can tell the authentic story. Like after my husband died, I had never been to a restaurant by myself. I'd never gone into a bar and bought, beer or a glass of wine by myself. Everything was so hard. I was good. I wasn't like I studied honors economics, so I was comfortable with the money parts of things. But I'd never bought a house by myself. And so all of those firsts were incredibly challenging. And you wouldn't believe how like knotted up I got about having the first time going out to a restaurant eating by myself. I didn't have any choice because I was traveling and I was traveling by myself. So, but now, decades later, because my husband died many years ago, these things are easy. They're normal. I have become so much more of a powerful person by facing the things that I was afraid of or that were uncomfortable for me. And I didn't realize that I had the capacity to be so competent. And really, I think I'm not extraordinary. Like, I think we're all more capable than we think. And I think we're all able to make a bigger difference than we think. Buckminster Fuller, well, not a woman, is one of my inspirations because, he set forth to see what can one person do to make the world a better place. And he invented the geodesic dome and did a bunch of things that are really great. So I love the fact that you just mentioned that women are going to be inheriting so much wealth because generally speaking, women care more. We're more, generally speaking, people focused, environment focused. And my hope and wish would be that we step into our power so that we can do so whatever you see would make the world better or your family better or your business better or the world. Why not the world? That you empower yourself right now, maybe work with Angelina and get your estate planning and your legacy planning, perhaps work with somebody like me to get your brand strategy blueprint and get your book out there so that you are ready to go. now, like get ready to go now for what's coming up in the next decade.
Yeah. Since this is a legacy podcast, we're going to get personal. In one or two sentences, what would you like your holistic legacy to be?
I would love my legacy to be that I am remembered as somebody who inspired others to live up to their full creative potential and make the difference that they can.
And what would you say are your top three or four core values as we come to a close?
Well, you might not be surprised. My top value really is freedom, hence the entrepreneurship, creativity, and learning. I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning, which makes me a good teacher because I'm always learning stuff. I think my my spiritual belief is that we are all created in the image and likeness of the great creator. So when we are creating, that is like being a drop of the ocean of divinity. So I think expressing your creativity is a way for you to express your divinity. So that's why my legacy is around helping people be creative because I can't think of anything cooler than that. And then freedom because yeah, who wants to be trapped?
Yeah, yeah.
So freedom shows up like time freedom, who I work with freedom, freedom to create, freedom, to be a philanthropist, freedom to be generous, health freedom so that I can go exercise in the morning. Yeah. What about you? What are your top three?
Oh, I think something along the lines of like aesthetics, like beauty, but beauty not in the sense of like nail polish or something shallow, but beauty that is in all of us, as well as
Hmm.
justice and truth.
Hmm. And what legacy do you want to leave the world?
Oh, you're putting the host on the spot. I think a lot of times, I think initially I wanted to be a real estate developer, like an interior designer, like kind of what Shay McGee does on Studio McGee, where she'll go into a property and turn something into something that is renovated, not just something that's cookie cutter from a tract home or whatever. So it in one sense it's to turn ugliness into beauty, but ugliness could be how people are trapped within a legacy through lies, or they're
Yeah.
trapped because they haven't done the inner work, or they're trapped because they inherited silence compared to structure, or something along the lines. And then to see that transformation of them being able to come out the other side and go, okay, I've got a plan now. And like you had said, it just doesn't impact them. There's a ripple effect for the people around them, but also for years to come. And
Yeah.
I bring up the Rothschilds not because I like all their business decisions, but because they were willing to set aside their weekends and weeknights and maybe not watch the sports game, not perhaps watch the streaming Netflix video, but to sit down and with the family, extended family included, and say, how do we want to steward what we've been given? Because
Hmm.
they're self-made. They didn't just, get born with
Right.
I mean, they worked hard. And again, I might not agree with, what they did in terms of the Napoleon and all, like how they made their wealth and so forth. But I think it goes to the point of commitment. And so
Yeah.
I think about, how do you turn ugliness into beauty? Well, everyone's got their challenges of, how do I, you know, invest in something? How do I make that deposit into the future and into our personal development? Because money can disappear in through our hands so quickly.
That's why I love learning because learning never disappears. But what I'm really hearing from what you just said is like have your legacy be by design, not by default.
Yeah, somebody has to be willing to do the self-reflection though. And as somebody becomes more successful, can they still be humble? Because with success can come arrogance. With success can come what they call like being in the comfort zone. There was a book, and I always forget the psychologist's name. He's out of New Hampshire. It's called Strangers in Paradise. And it says when you become wealthy, it's like you go to this island, and the island is so wonderful that you never want to leave the island. But it's also so wonderful that you stop doing the work of kind of pushing the ball up the hill like Sisyphus every day, of like self-reflection or the morning routine or having people tell you the hard truths compared to be surrounded by yes people.
Mm. Well, that certainly is the case at the extreme. There's so many Hollywood stars surrounded by yes people. And mostly I disagree with that, though. I think money is a magnifier.
It is a
So I
magnifier.
think
Like success and failure are magnifiers.
whoever you are, yeah, you become more so. And in fact, I'm grateful for my failures. I'm grateful for, My husband dying, I'm not grateful that he died, obviously. I'm grateful for how it changed me. I think that, well, science shows struggle rewires your brain. You actually lay down more myelin. It's only through struggle that people actually grow. So we want to beware of that comfort zone because we're not growing our brain.
If somebody, and then I'll wrap up after this, but if somebody is willing to step into post-traumatic growth, fantastic. Some people stay frozen
Yeah.
because there's 1,000 forms of escapism.
Yes. Yes, there's all kinds of things you can do to stay stuck. And one of the worst things is deciding that your definition of yourself, that your identity is as a victim. But yeah, post-traumatic growth is a big thing. And in fact, I wrote about post-traumatic growth a little bit in Turn Words into Wealth and more in my other books. But it is really interesting because you can lay down myelin at any age. And what happens if you've never had a thought before and then you have a eureka moment, it's like zzz, that is actually a new neural connection that happens when you have that eureka moment. But what can happen if you are continually at the edge of your capability? That's where you're learning. It's like that top like 4% where you're right on the edge, but not over it. Like when you're playing a tennis player who's who's better than you, or you're practicing the violin right at your edge. Your myelin, and this both affects mental and physical, it can change from the processing speed of 2 miles per hour to 200 miles an hour. So you can 100x your response time to thinking as well as physical tasks by practicing difficult things.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So, to any of the listeners out there, I think one of the tips that I will wrap us up with is the 5 closest people that you surround yourself with, and consider Aurora Winter as one of those 5 people for your future. But bump. Okay.
But people want to learn more, they can go to samepagepublishing.com. And if they want help creating a legacy book or a strategic brand blueprint, they can go to bookcall.biz and we'd be glad to chat with you and see if we can help.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so let me circle back to the intention we set at the very beginning of today's episode, which is what if today's conversation inspires you and shakes you up for the design of your legacy? And I think we have fulfilled that business promise. You talked about throughout today's conversation regarding how independent publishers are outselling the top 5 publishing houses. So consider partnering with a consultant such as yourself to help design that strategic brand design. And you spoke about case studies like Alec Hermosi and even the success of Mel Robbins regarding the vulnerability that we think we should leave out, but yet should be included in terms of helping today's audience or readers, listeners, etc. If let's say if there's an audio version of your book, confront the problems that perhaps you have walked through and guiding others in overcoming dragons. I think you use that phrase. And also understanding that your firm can also launch thought leaders. So even if someone is an attorney or someone that is a professional out there, this can even add to their success,
Yeah.
regardless of their age or their stage in life. And also regarding superpowers, you talked about taste and aesthetic and understanding that 1.7 seconds is now the attention span and filter of many of today's prospective consumers, customers, prospects, etc. So thank you very much for your time. And would you share your website one more time for the listeners and viewers?
The website is samepagepublishing.com because we come on the same page as our clients. And I want to also challenge people, don't just leave this excellent podcast with, oh, that was interesting, but please decide to do something within the next 24 hours. It might be just outlining your book, it might be reading a book, it might be listening to this podcast again, but decide to do something. Because hopefully we've both inspired you, but inspiration without action is not what we're going for. So take some action.
Bravo. Okay. In closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder to Legacy Planning, a boutique advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, United States, but international in those I get to coach and consult. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners and viewers, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. If you're tuning in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. Please remember to rate and review, share with your family and friends. And if you feel so inclined, send an email to either Aurora or myself to let us know your thoughts or feelings about today's conversation. So thank you so much for joining. And thank you, Aurora, for speaking into your legacy.
My pleasure.